My girlfriend Brielle left me for what she thought was a wealthy businessman, humiliating me in front of our entire social circle when she announced she was moving in with Ryker and his empire. For months I watched her flaunt her new lifestyle on social media: designer clothes, luxury cars, private jets, exclusive galas, while she mocked my small-time consulting business and called me a failure who would never amount to anything. Then came the invitation to Ryker's annual charity gala, where Brielle stood beside him like a trophy wife, telling everyone how she'd upgraded from dating a nobody to being with a real success story. But what they didn't know was that every single thing Ryker owned, the penthouse, the cars, the business accounts, even the company itself, was all built on loans and credit lines that I had personally guaranteed for him 3 years ago when he was broke and desperate. That night, in front of 200 of the city's elite, I decided it was time to collect. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years ago, my life was completely different. I was running a successful business consulting firm from my office in downtown Millbrook Heights, helping struggling companies restructure their operations and finances. My girlfriend Brielle Montgomery had been with me for 2 years at that point, and I thought we had built something real together. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising agency, and while we weren't living in luxury, we were comfortable, happy, and planning our future together. That's when Ryker walked into my life. I still remember that rainy Tuesday morning when he first appeared at my office. He was desperate, his clothes slightly wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes, and a briefcase that looked like it had seen better days. Ryker claimed to be the CEO of Stone Industries, a revolutionary tech startup that was on the verge of breakthrough success but needed immediate capital injection and strategic guidance to avoid bankruptcy. "Levi," he said, leaning forward in the chair across from my desk, his voice carrying a mixture of desperation and determination. "I know this might sound crazy, but I need someone who believes in potential rather than just current assets. My company is 3 weeks away from either becoming the next big thing or disappearing completely." His presentation was compelling, I'll give him that. Ryker had charts, projections, and a business model that looked solid on paper. He talked about revolutionary software solutions, government contracts that were practically guaranteed, and investors who were just waiting for the right moment to flood his company with capital. The problem was immediate cash flow and credit issues that were preventing him from accessing his frozen assets. "I need someone to guarantee some loans," Ryker explained, his hands gesturing emphatically. "Just temporary, maybe 6 months maximum. Once my investors come through, and these contracts are signed, you'll be the first person I pay back, plus a substantial return on your faith in me." Looking back, I realize how naive I was. But Ryker was convincing, and his desperation felt genuine. He showed me bank statements, with impressive numbers, though they were marked as pending or frozen due to regulatory review. He had contracts with official letterheads and signatures that looked legitimate. Most importantly, he had that entrepreneur's fire in his eyes that I recognized because I had felt it myself when starting my own business. Brielle was there that evening when I told her about Ryker's proposal. We were having dinner at our favorite small Italian restaurant in Millbrook Heights, the kind of place where the owner knew our usual orders and always sent over complimentary dessert. "Are you sure about this, Levi?" Brielle asked, twirling her pasta thoughtfully. "I mean, guaranteeing loans for someone you just met seems risky." "It's not just anyone," I explained. "This guy has real potential. Sometimes in business, you have to take calculated risks on people. If his projections are even half accurate, this could be huge for both of us." Brielle smiled and reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "If you believe in him, then I trust your judgment. You've always been good at seeing potential in people and situations that others miss." That support meant everything to me. Over the next several weeks, I helped Ryker secure credit lines, totaling nearly $2 million. I guaranteed business loans, co-signed for office space leases, and even put my own consulting business assets as collateral for his equipment financing. The paperwork was extensive, but everything seemed legitimate, and Ryker's gratitude was overwhelming. "Levi, I swear to you, 6 months from now, you're going to look back on this as the smartest investment decision you ever made," Ryker told me as we signed the final documents at my lawyer's office. "You're not just helping me save my company, you're positioning yourself to benefit from its success. Within weeks, Ryker's lifestyle began to change dramatically. Suddenly he was wearing expensive suits, driving a brand new BMW, and talking about moving into a luxury penthouse in Silverstone district. He explained that his investors had finally released some preliminary funding, and he needed to look the part to secure the larger deals that were coming. Image is everything in this business, Ryker told me during one of our weekly check-in meetings. Potential clients and investors need to see success before they'll commit to working with you. This penthouse, this car, these clothes, they're all investments in the company's future. I was happy for him, honestly. Seeing someone I had helped achieve success felt incredibly rewarding. Brielle and I were invited to a housewarming party at his new penthouse, a stunning 45th floor apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. The place was decorated with expensive art, high-end furniture, and all the latest technology. "This is incredible, Ryker," Brielle said, walking around the apartment with obvious admiration. "You've really made it." That night, I noticed something shift in Brielle's demeanor. She spent the entire party asking Ryker about his business strategies, his investment philosophy, and his plans for expansion. She laughed at his jokes more than necessary, complimented his taste in decoration, and seemed genuinely impressed by his apparent success. "He's really something special," Brielle commented on the drive home. "I mean, to go from nearly bankrupt to this level of success in just a few months, that takes real vision and talent." I agreed, though something felt slightly off about her tone. There was an admiration in her voice that went beyond professional respect, but I pushed the thought aside. Brielle and I had been together for over 2 years, and I trusted her completely. Over the following months, Ryker's success continued to accelerate. He bought a second car, a sleek Porsche that he claimed was necessary for impressing clients. He started wearing custom suits and expensive watches. He joined an exclusive country club and began hosting elaborate business dinners at 5-star restaurants throughout the city. Meanwhile, my own business was doing well, but not spectacularly. I was making steady income, paying my bills, and slowly building my client base. Compared to Ryker's flashy lifestyle, my practical Honda and modest apartment probably looked underwhelming. The first real warning sign came about 8 months after I had guaranteed Ryker's initial loans. I received a call from one of the banks, asking about missed payments on accounts that Ryker was supposed to be handling. "Mr. Kensington," the loan officer explained, "we show that Mr. Stone's company has missed the last 2 monthly payments on the equipment financing agreement. Since you're the guarantor, we wanted to give you advance notice before this affects your credit rating." I immediately called Ryker, who seemed genuinely surprised and apologetic. "Levi, I'm so sorry, there must be some mix-up with our accounting department," he said. "We've been so busy with new contracts that some of the routine payments must have fallen through the cracks. I'll handle this immediately." He did handle it, making the overdue payments within 48 hours, but similar incidents began happening with increasing frequency. Each time, Ryker had reasonable explanations, accounting errors, delayed client payments, temporary cash flow issues that were being resolved. Each time, he quickly corrected the problems, but I was starting to feel uneasy about the situation. The breaking point came exactly 1 year after I had first helped Ryker. I was working late in my office, reviewing contracts for a new client, when my phone rang. It was Brielle, and her voice sounded different, distant, and formal. "Levi, we need to talk," she said. "Can you meet me at Café Luna tomorrow morning? There's something important I need to tell you." Café Luna was a trendy coffee shop in the Arts District, not our usual meeting spot. Something about her tone and choice of location immediately put me on edge, but I agreed to meet her there at 10 a.m. the following day. That night, I barely slept, running through possibilities in my mind about what could be so important that it required a formal meeting rather than just talking at home. When I arrived at Café Luna the next morning, I found Brielle sitting at a corner table, dressed more formally than usual, her posture rigid, and her expression serious. "Levi," she began before I even sat down, "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our relationship and where my life is heading." Those words hit me like a physical blow. In my experience, conversations that began with "I've been thinking about our relationship" never ended well. I sat down slowly, my coffee forgotten, as Brielle continued speaking in that same detached tone I had never heard her use before. I've realized that we want different things from life, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. You're content with your small consulting business, your modest lifestyle, your predictable routine. But I want more than that, Levi. I want to experience real success, real luxury, the kind of life that pushes boundaries and opens doors. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Brielle, what are you talking about? I asked, genuinely confused. We've always talked about building something together, growing slowly and steadily. Since when do you care about luxury and flashy success? She finally looked directly at me, and I saw something in her eyes that I had never seen before. A cold calculation that made my stomach drop. Since I realized what's actually possible when you're with someone who thinks bigger than just getting by, she replied. Levi, you're a good person, and you'll probably have a comfortable life, but you lack ambition. You lack the killer instinct that separates successful people from everyone else. I don't understand where this is coming from, I said, reaching across the table toward her hand, but she pulled away. Brielle, we've been happy together. We've built something real. She laughed, but it wasn't the warm laugh I had fallen in love with. This was sharp, dismissive, almost cruel. Happy, Levi, look around. Look at what real success looks like. Look at what Ryker has accomplished in just 1 year. That's the kind of man who can offer a woman a real future, not just scraping by paycheck to paycheck. The mention of Ryker's name hit me like a sledgehammer. Suddenly, all those subtle changes in Brielle's behavior over the past few months made terrible sense. The way she had been asking about his business strategies, complimenting his success, staying late at work events that seemed to coincidentally align with Ryker's social calendar. This is about Ryker, I said, and it wasn't a question. Brielle's cheeks flushed slightly, but her voice remained steady. Ryker has shown me what's possible when you're with someone who actually has vision and drive. He's building an empire, Levi. He's making deals that will change industries. He lives in a world of real power and influence. Brielle, you can't be serious. We've been together for over 2 years. You're going to throw that away for some guy you barely know. I know enough, she said firmly. I know that in 1 year, he's accomplished more than you probably will in your entire life. I know that he sees potential and acts on it, instead of playing it safe. I know that he can offer me experiences and opportunities that you never could. I felt like I was drowning. The woman I had been planning to propose to, the woman I had trusted completely, was sitting across from me, explaining why she was leaving me for another man, as if she were discussing the weather. So what, you've been seeing him behind my back? I asked, though I already knew the answer. It's not like that, Brielle said, though her defensive tone suggested otherwise. We've been talking, getting to know each other. He's been helping me understand what I really want from life, what I deserve from a relationship. What you deserve, I repeated, anger finally starting to replace the shock. What exactly do you think you deserve, Brielle? Her eyes flashed with something between anger and superiority. I deserve a man who can match my ambitions. I deserve someone who doesn't just dream about success, but actually achieves it. I deserve to be with someone who can introduce me to important people, take me to exclusive events, show me the world instead of just talking about it. And you think Ryker can give you all that? I know he can, she said with absolute certainty. Levi, I'm moving in with Ryker this weekend. I've already given notice at my apartment, and I've arranged to have my things picked up from our place while you're at work. The calculated nature of her planning was almost as hurtful as the betrayal itself. This wasn't a spontaneous decision, or even a recent development. She had been planning this for weeks, maybe months, while continuing to sleep in my bed and accept my trust. I can't believe this, I said, standing up from the table. I can't believe you would do this. Levi, please don't make this harder than it needs to be, Brielle said, her voice softening slightly, for the first time during our conversation. You're a good person, and you'll find someone who's satisfied with the kind of life you want to live. But that's not me anymore. I left Cafe Luna in a daze, walking aimlessly through downtown Millbrook Heights, trying to process what had just happened. The woman I loved, the woman I had been planning to propose to, had just left me for a man whose success I had personally guaranteed. Over the next few days, the full scope of the humiliation became clear. Brielle didn't just leave quietly. she made sure everyone in our social circle knew about her upgrade. She posted photos on social media from Ryker's penthouse, with captions like, "Sometimes life surprises you with exactly what you need when you need it," and "Grateful for new beginnings and the courage to choose happiness." Mutual friends started reaching out with awkward phone calls and messages, clearly having heard her version of events. Sarah, a mutual friend from our college days, called me 3 days after the breakup. "Levi, I'm so sorry about what happened with Brielle," she said, her voice gentle but curious. "I have to ask though, is it true that you were holding her back from opportunities? She mentioned that you weren't supportive of her career ambitions." "What career ambitions?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Brielle works in marketing coordination. She's never mentioned wanting to do anything else." "Oh," Sarah said, sounding surprised. "She told everyone that you were discouraging her from pursuing opportunities in high-level business development because you were threatened by her potential success." This was news to me. Not only had Brielle left me for another man, but she was actively rewriting our entire relationship history to make herself look like a victim who had been held back by an insecure partner. The social media posts got worse as weeks went by. Photos of Brielle at exclusive restaurants, wearing designer dresses I knew cost more than her monthly salary, attending gallery openings and charity events in Silverstone District. Each post felt like a deliberate knife twist, especially the captions that seemed designed to emphasize how much better her life was now. "Living my best life with someone who believes in reaching for the stars," she posted alongside a photo of herself and Ryker at some high-end wine tasting event. "Sometimes you don't realize how small you were thinking until someone shows you how big dreams can actually be." Accompanied a picture of them at a private box at the city's most exclusive theater. "Grateful to be with a real entrepreneur who builds empires instead of just maintaining comfort zones," posted from what looked like a private jet. The worst part was watching people respond to these posts with congratulations and admiration. Friends who had known both of us for years were commenting things like, "You deserve all this happiness," and "So proud of you for choosing yourself," and "Ryker seems amazing. You two are perfect together." Meanwhile, I was dealing with an increasing number of calls from banks and creditors, asking about missed payments on loans that Ryker was supposed to be handling. Each conversation was a reminder that while he was living this lavish lifestyle with my ex-girlfriend, he was doing it with money that I had guaranteed. "Kensington, this is the 3rd missed payment on the Silverstone District office lease," one property manager informed me, during a particularly frustrating call. "As the guarantor, you're legally responsible for these payments if Mr. Stone's company continues to default." "I understand," I replied, rubbing my temples as I looked at the growing stack of default notices on my desk. "I'll take care of it." This became my new routine. Working during the day to keep my own business afloat, then spending evenings making payments on Ryker's obligations to protect my own credit rating. All while watching my ex-girlfriend flaunt a lifestyle that I was literally paying for, without anyone knowing the truth about where Ryker's apparent wealth was actually coming from. The breaking point came 6 months after Brielle had left me. I was having lunch alone at a small deli near my office, when I overheard a conversation at the next table between 2 women who worked in the same office building. "Did you see Brielle Montgomery's latest post?" one of them was saying. "She's dating that tech mogul Ryker Stone now. Apparently, she dumped some loser consultant who was holding her back." "Oh, I know exactly who you mean," the other woman replied. "My friend Sarah knows both of them. She said the guy was super controlling and didn't want Brielle to succeed because he was intimidated by strong women. Typical insecure man behavior. It's so inspiring to see a woman choose herself and upgrade to someone who actually appreciates her worth," the first woman continued. "Ryker Stone is supposed to be worth millions. He owns that huge tech company and has all those government contracts. Brielle really landed a winner." I sat there listening to strangers discuss my failed relationship based on complete lies, while knowing that every dollar of Ryker's apparent success was backed by my personal guarantees. The humiliation was complete. Not only had Brielle left me, but she had turned our entire relationship into a cautionary tale about small-minded men who hold back ambitious women. That evening, I went home to my modest apartment and found an elegant envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a formal invitation printed on heavy cardstock with gold lettering. Mr. Ryker Stone and Stone Industries cordially invite you to the 3rd Annual Silverstone District Charity Gala, benefiting the Metropolitan Arts Foundation. Join us for an evening of philanthropy, fine dining, and celebration as we raise funds for arts education programs throughout the city. At the bottom, someone had handwritten an elegant script. Levi, would love for you to see how far we've come. Hope you can make it. Ara stared at the invitation for a long time, anger building in my chest. Ryker wanted me to attend his charity gala, to see him playing the role of successful philanthropist, while I knew the truth about every penny he was spending. He wanted me to watch him with Brielle, showing off the life they were building together with money I had guaranteed. That's when I decided it was time to stop being the silent victim in this story. If Ryker wanted me at his gala, I would absolutely be there. But not as the pathetic ex-boyfriend watching from the sidelines. It was time for everyone to learn the truth about where Ryker Stone's empire had really come from. The Silverstone District Charity Gala was being held at the Grand Meridian Hotel, one of the most prestigious venues in the city. As I approached the entrance in my modest but well-tailored suit, I was struck by the sheer extravagance of the event. Valet attendants were parking Bentleys, Maseratis, and vehicles I couldn't even identify. Women in designer gowns worth more than most people's monthly salaries glided up the red carpet, while photographers captured every moment. I felt completely out of place, but I had spent the last week preparing for this moment. In my jacket pocket, I carried a folder containing every loan document, every guarantee agreement, and every payment record related to Ryker's supposed empire. Tonight, the truth would finally come out. The hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed into something resembling a royal palace. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across walls draped in silver and gold fabric. Round tables for 10 were arranged throughout the space, each one decorated with elaborate floral centerpieces that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. I had barely stepped into the ballroom when I heard a familiar laugh that made my stomach clench. There, at the center of a group of admirers near the champagne fountain, stood Brielle Montgomery, looking absolutely stunning in a midnight blue gown that hugged her figure perfectly. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, and she wore jewelry that sparkled under the ballroom lights like captured starlight. Beside her, with his arm possessively around her waist, stood Ryker Stone, looking every inch the successful businessman. His tuxedo was clearly custom-made. His shoes probably cost more than my monthly rent, and his confidence radiated across the room, like he owned not just the evening, but the entire city. And that's when I realized, Brielle was saying to the group gathered around them, her voice carrying clearly across the space, that sometimes you have to be brave enough to leave your comfort zone and reach for what you really deserve in life. A well-dressed older woman in the group nodded approvingly. It takes real courage to recognize when you've outgrown a situation and make the changes necessary to align with your true potential. Exactly, Brielle replied, her hand resting on Ryker's chest in a gesture that felt deliberately performative. I was with someone who was satisfied with mediocrity, who thought small and wanted me to think small too. But Ryker showed me what's possible when you're with a real visionary. Ryker smiled indulgently and pulled her closer. Brielle has incredible instincts for recognizing opportunity and potential. That's why she fits so perfectly into this world of high-level business and strategic thinking. I stood frozen about 20 feet away, watching this performance, while feeling like I might vomit. They weren't just happy together, they were actively rewriting history to make themselves look like heroes who had overcome small-minded obstacles. The charity work alone has been so fulfilling, Brielle continued, gesturing around the ballroom. When you're with someone who has real resources and genuine commitment to making a difference, you can actually impact people's lives instead of just talking about it. That comment hit me like a physical blow. I had volunteered at local literacy programs for 3 years, something Brielle had always claimed to respect about me. But apparently, my small-scale volunteer work didn't count as real charity compared to hosting expensive galas. I was debating whether to approach them or just leave when someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to find Jessica Walsh, a woman I recognized from several business networking events in the city. "Levi Kensington, right?" she said with a bright smile.
I remember you from the Millbrook Heights Business Association meetings. What brings you to such a high-end event? Did you finally land some major clients?" Before I could answer, her question had caught the attention of several nearby people, including someone who apparently knew about my connection to Brielle and Ryker. "Oh, that's interesting," said a man in an expensive suit who had been eavesdropping on our conversation. "Aren't you the guy who used to date Brielle Montgomery before she upgraded to Ryker Stone?" The words "upgraded to" felt like a knife twist, but suddenly the entire group around Brielle and Ryker had turned their attention toward me. I watched Brielle's face go through a series of expressions: surprise, embarrassment, and then something that looked almost like panic. "Levi," Ryker said with a broad smile that didn't reach his eyes, "I'm so glad you could make it tonight. Everyone, this is Levi Kensington, an old friend who helped me out during the early days of building Stone Industries." The way he phrased it made it sound like I had provided some minor assistance, rather than guaranteeing nearly $2 million in loans. But before I could correct him, Brielle stepped forward with her own performance. "Levi," she said with a tone of voice I had never heard her use before, somewhere between pity and condescension. "It's so sweet that you came tonight. I hope you're doing well with your little consulting business." The word "little" was delivered with just enough emphasis to make it clear that she was deliberately diminishing my work in front of this crowd of successful people. "Actually," I began, but Ryker cut me off with a laugh that sounded friendly but felt hostile. "Levi's always been the cautious type," Ryker announced to the group. "Very focused on small safe projects rather than big vision thinking. Nothing wrong with that approach, of course. The world needs people who are content with modest success." Several people in the group chuckled in a way that felt more like mockery than genuine amusement. I realized that I was being set up as the evening's entertainment, the small-time loser who provided a useful contrast to highlight Ryker and Brielle's supposed superiority. "I imagine it must be difficult," said an elegantly dressed woman who had been listening to this exchange, "watching someone you used to date move on to such a higher level of success and sophistication. Especially when you're still doing the same small-scale work you were doing years ago," added another person. "Some people just lack the vision to grow beyond their circumstances." I felt heat rising in my chest as the group's attention focused on me like I was some kind of zoo exhibit. These people who didn't know anything about me or my work were discussing my supposed limitations based entirely on Brielle and Ryker's framing of the situation. "The important thing," Brielle said with what sounded like genuine kindness, but felt deeply patronizing, "is that everyone finds their appropriate level in life. Not everyone is cut out for high-stakes business or the demands of real success." "Absolutely," Ryker agreed, his arm tightening around Brielle's waist. "Some people are perfectly happy with their modest lifestyles and predictable routines. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary." The word "ordinary" hung in the air like a challenge. Around us, I could see other guests starting to notice the conversation and drifting closer, apparently sensing some kind of social drama unfolding. "Tell me, Levi," said a man who had just joined the group, "what exactly do you do? I mean, what kind of consulting work are we talking about?" Before I could answer, Ryker jumped in again. "Levi helps small businesses with basic operational issues. Very practical, very down-to-earth work. Not glamorous, but certainly necessary." His tone made it sound like I was providing some kind of janitorial service, rather than strategic business consulting. The group nodded politely, but I could see in their eyes that I had already been categorized as irrelevant to their world of serious success. "That's so nice, that you still keep in touch with people from your past," someone said to Brielle. "It shows real character to maintain friendships even when you've moved to such a different level." Friendship was apparently what they were calling this humiliation now.
"I try to stay connected to all phases of my life," Brielle replied with what sounded like magnanimous generosity. "Even if our paths have diverged significantly, I still care about Levi's well-being." This performance of gracious superiority was somehow worse than outright hostility would have been. They weren't just succeeding, they were positioning themselves as benevolent successes who maintained kind concern for their less fortunate past associations. "You know what I find most admirable about Ryker," Brielle continued, apparently warming to her theme, "is how he's never forgotten where he came from, or the people who believed in him along the way. Even when he was building his empire, He always maintained perspective about different types of success. I stood there listening to my ex-girlfriend praise another man's character, while that man spent money I had guaranteed, living in apartments I was paying for, and hosting charity galas funded by loans I had co-signed. The sheer audacity of the performance was breathtaking. "Speaking of the empire," said someone in the group, "Ryker, tell us about your latest acquisition." "I heard Stone Industries just purchased another software development company." Ryker's chest puffed up with pride. "We're always looking for strategic opportunities to expand our technological capabilities and market reach. This latest acquisition positions us to compete with much larger firms in the government contracting space." More lies built on my financial guarantees, delivered to a room full of people who would never know the truth about where his empire had actually originated. That's when I felt something inside me snap. I had been silent for too long, accepting too much, allowing myself to be diminished and dismissed while watching other people profit from my own generosity. As I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the folder of documents that would expose everything, I realized that this humiliation was about to become the last moment of their performance. The truth was about to set everyone free. Just as I was reaching into my jacket pocket for the folder of documents that would expose Ryker's lies, a commanding voice cut through the group's laughter and conversation. "Levi Kensington, there you are." Everyone turned to see a distinguished woman in her 50s approaching our group with purpose and confidence. She was elegantly dressed in a charcoal gray designer suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, and her presence immediately commanded attention from everyone in the vicinity. I recognized her immediately, Victoria Blackwood, Senior Vice President of Premier Capital Bank and one of the most influential financiers in the city. "Miss Blackwood," I said, genuinely surprised to see her. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Oh, I wouldn't miss Ryker's charity gala," Victoria replied with a smile that seemed friendly, but carried an edge. "I couldn't quite identify, especially not when I heard you might be attending. We've been looking for you." The word "we" seemed to hang in the air with particular weight. Behind Victoria, I noticed two other people approaching: James Hartford, a federal banking regulator I had met at several industry conferences, and Everly Sinclair, an investigative financial journalist, whose articles about corporate fraud had taken down several high-profile executives over the past few years. Ryker's confident expression faltered slightly as he recognized the caliber of people who were suddenly focused on our conversation. These weren't social acquaintances or business networking contacts. These were serious professionals whose attention could make or break careers. "Levi," James Hartford said, extending his hand with a firm handshake, "we've been hoping to connect with you about some irregularities we've discovered in several major loan portfolios. Your name keeps appearing as a guarantor on some very interesting financial arrangements." I felt the energy of the entire group shift as the implications of his words sank in. Suddenly, I wasn't the pathetic ex-boyfriend or small-time consultant they had been mocking. I was someone that federal regulators and major bank executives were actively seeking out for important conversations. "Irregularities?" Brielle asked, her voice betraying the first hint of uncertainty I had heard from her all evening. Everly Sinclair stepped forward, her notebook already in hand. "Mr. Kensington, I'm working on an investigative piece about questionable lending practices and potentially fraudulent business operations in the tech sector. Several sources have mentioned your name as someone who might have insights into how certain companies have managed to secure funding despite questionable financial foundations." Ryker's face had gone completely pale. The confident, successful businessman persona was cracking as he realized that these weren't casual social inquiries, but serious professional investigations. "I'm not sure I understand what this has to do with tonight's charity event," Ryker said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. "This is supposed to be a celebration of community giving and support for the arts." Victoria Blackwood's smile grew sharper. "Oh, but community giving is exactly what we're here to discuss, Mr. Stone. After all, it's quite generous when someone guarantees millions of dollars in loans to help a struggling entrepreneur get back on their feet. Wouldn't you agree?" The group of wealthy socialites, who had been mocking me moments earlier, suddenly looked confused and uncomfortable. The power dynamic they thought they understood was shifting before their eyes. "Mr. Stone," James Hartford continued, "we've been reviewing some concerning patterns in your company's financial records. Multiple missed payments, irregular fund transfers, and what appears to be systematic misrepresentation of assets and revenue streams. I think there might be some confusion," Ryker said, his voice getting higher and more defensive. "Stone Industries has been completely transparent in all our financial dealings." "Transparent," Everly Sinclair looked up from her notebook with raised eyebrows. Is that what you call using guaranteed funds to maintain a personal lifestyle that far exceeds your company's actual revenue? Because that's not typically how business loans are supposed to work. Brielle grabbed Ryker's arm, her perfectly composed facade beginning to crack. What are they talking about? Ryker, you said your investors had released funding for the company's expansion. The question hung in the air like an accusation, and I watched Ryker struggle to maintain his composure while realizing that his carefully constructed empire was about to be examined by people who actually understood how business finance worked. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria Blackwood addressed the group of socialites who had been listening to this exchange with growing fascination. I think you should know that Mr. Kensington here is one of the most astute financial minds in this city. His consulting work has helped dozens of companies navigate complex funding challenges and regulatory requirements. She turned back to me with genuine respect in her voice. Levi, when can we schedule a formal meeting to discuss your experiences with these loan guarantee arrangements? The Federal Trade Commission is very interested in your perspective on this case. The Federal Trade Commission. The words hit the group like a bomb, and suddenly everyone was looking at me with completely different eyes. I wasn't the small-time consultant they had been dismissing. I was a key witness in what was apparently a major federal investigation. Of course, I replied calmly, finally finding my voice again. I have extensive documentation of all the arrangements we'll need to discuss. As I spoke, I noticed that the crowd around us had grown significantly. Other gala attendees had been drawn by the presence of such high-profile investigators, and word was spreading quickly that something major was happening at Ryker Stone's charity event. The humiliation spectacle had just become something entirely different. Mr. Kensington, Victoria Blackwood continued, her voice carrying clearly across the increasingly crowded space around us. Perhaps you could share with everyone here exactly what kind of documentation you have regarding Mr. Stone's financial arrangements. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I pulled the folder from my jacket pocket, its weight suddenly feeling like vindication rather than burden. The crowd had grown to include at least 30 people, all drawn by the presence of federal investigators and the promise of witnessing something unprecedented at a high society charity gala. I have every loan agreement, every guarantee document, and every payment record, I said, opening the folder and removing the first set of papers. Everything that Mr. Stone calls his empire is built on credit lines and loans that I personally guaranteed starting 3 years ago. A murmur rippled through the crowd as I held up the documents. Brielle's face had gone completely white, and Ryker looked like he might be sick. These documents show that I guaranteed $1.2 million for his initial business operations. I continued, pulling out another set of papers. Another $400,000 for his office lease in Silverstone District, $200,000 for his luxury vehicle financing, and an additional $350,000 for what he claimed were essential business operations, but which apparently included this penthouse apartment and his exclusive country club memberships. James Hartford stepped forward and took the documents I offered, scanning them quickly with the practiced eye of someone who reviewed financial records professionally. His expression grew increasingly serious as he read. Mr. Stone, Hartford said, looking up from the papers, according to these records, you've missed payments on 60% of these guaranteed loans over the past 18 months. Mr. Kensington has been making the payments to protect his own credit rating, while you've been living off the borrowed funds. The crowd's attention turned to Ryker, whose confident businessman persona had completely evaporated. He was sweating visibly despite the ballroom's comfortable temperature, and his hands were shaking as he tried to maintain some semblance of composure. There must be some misunderstanding, Ryker said weakly. My company has been managing all our financial obligations appropriately. Your company, Everly Sinclair looked up from her notebook with sharp interest. Mr. Stone, according to the corporate filings I've reviewed, Stone Industries has generated exactly $0 in actual revenue over the past 2 years. Every penny of income listed in your financial statements can be traced back to these guaranteed loans. Brielle staggered backward as if she had been physically struck. What does that mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It means, Victoria Blackwood explained with clinical precision, that everything Mr. Stone has been presenting as business success has actually been funded by Mr. Kensington's personal guarantees. The penthouse apartment, the luxury cars, the expensive dinners, the designer clothes, even tonight's charity gala, all of it has been paid for with borrowed money.
that Mr. Kensington is legally responsible for. The implications hit the crowd like a wave. These wealthy socialites, who had been mocking me as a small-time failure just minutes earlier, suddenly realized they had been completely wrong about who was actually successful and who was living a lie. But the investors, Brielle said desperately, turning to Ryker. You said your investors had released funding. You said the government contracts were coming through. Ryker's silence was damning. He couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't answer her questions, couldn't maintain any of the lies that had sustained their relationship. There are no investors, I said quietly. There are no government contracts. There is no successful tech company. There's just a man who convinced me to guarantee his debts and then built a fake lifestyle to impress people, while I paid the bills. The crowd was completely silent now, absorbing the magnitude of the deception they had just witnessed. Several people were already pulling out their phones, undoubtedly preparing to share this revelation with their own social circles. Mr. Kensington, said a well-dressed man who had been part of the original group, mocking me. We owe you a significant apology. We had no idea about any of this. Others began nodding and murmuring similar sentiments, the same people who had been treating me like entertainment suddenly eager to distance themselves from their earlier behavior. But I was watching Brielle, seeing the complete devastation in her eyes as she realized that everything she thought she knew about her new life had been built on lies. The man she had left me for, the success she had been so eager to join, the upgrade she had been so proud of, none of it was real. Brielle, Ryker said desperately, reaching for her arm, but she pulled away from him with a look of disgust and horror. Don't touch me, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of rage and humiliation that I had never heard before. You lied to me about everything. The complete role reversal was now visible to everyone in attendance. The successful businessman was revealed as a fraud, the sophisticated lifestyle was exposed as borrowed, and the small-time consultant they had dismissed was shown to be the person whose generosity and success had made it all possible. The weeks following the charity gala were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and professional validation that I had never experienced before. Everly Sinclair's investigative article, titled The Guaranteed Empire: How One Man's Generosity Funded Another's Deception, appeared on the front page of the Financial Tribune 3 days after the gala, and was picked up by major news outlets across the country. The article didn't just expose Ryker's fraud, it positioned me as an example of how successful entrepreneurs sometimes become victims of their own willingness to help others. Within 48 hours of publication, I received calls from 3 major consulting firms, offering partnership opportunities, 2 investment banks interested in my expertise, and dozens of business owners seeking my services. Kensington, Victoria Blackwood said during our follow-up meeting at Premier Capital Bank, we'd like to offer you a position as senior consultant for our business development division. Your ability to assess financial risk and identify potential fraud could be invaluable to our clients. The offer came with a salary that was nearly triple what I had been making with my independent consulting practice, plus equity participation, and the kind of prestige that opened doors throughout the business community. Meanwhile, Ryker's world collapsed with remarkable speed. The Federal Trade Commission's investigation revealed that Stone Industries was essentially a shell company, designed to funnel guaranteed loan money into personal expenses. Criminal charges were filed for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. His assets were frozen, his credit destroyed, and his reputation permanently destroyed in business circles throughout the city. The penthouse apartment was foreclosed, the luxury cars repossessed, and his country club membership revoked for non-payment of dues. Within a month, Ryker Stone went from appearing to be a successful tech mogul to being a defendant in a high-profile federal fraud case. But it was Brielle's reaction that surprised me most. 2 weeks after the gala, she appeared at my office without warning. Looking nothing like the confident woman who had broken up with me at Café Luna, or the sophisticated socialite who had mocked me at the charity event. She was wearing simple clothes, her hair unstyled, and her expression carried a humiliation deeper than anything I had ever seen. "Levi," she said, standing awkwardly in my office doorway, "can we talk?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk, the same chair where Ryker had first pitched me his desperate plea for help 3 years earlier. "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness," Brielle began, her voice shaking. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone, and I know I said things about you that were cruel and unfair." She paused, struggling to find words for thoughts that were clearly painful to confront. "I was so wrong about everything," she continued. "I thought success meant luxury and status, and being with someone who could give me experiences I couldn't afford myself. I thought you were small-minded and unambitious, because you weren't flashy or aggressive about promoting yourself." Brielle looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "But you were successful all along. You were generous enough to help someone you barely knew, responsible enough to honor commitments that weren't even your fault, and strong enough to handle betrayal and humiliation with dignity. Those are the qualities that actually matter." I listened to her confession, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. The woman I had once loved was acknowledging everything I had hoped she would understand about me, but it was far too late for that recognition to repair what had been broken. "Brielle," I said gently, "I appreciate your apology, and I forgive you for the pain you caused. But we can't go back to who we were before all this happened." She nodded, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I know. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I threw away, and I'm sorry for being too shallow to see your worth when it mattered." After she left, I sat in my office, reflecting on how completely my life had changed. The Federal Trade Commission had officially closed their investigation with recommendations for stricter oversight of personal loan guarantees. I had been interviewed by 3 different financial magazines as an expert on entrepreneurial risk assessment. Most importantly, I had learned something valuable about my own strength and character. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at the annual Millbrook Heights Business Association conference about ethical business practices and the importance of due diligence in financial partnerships. As I stood at the podium, looking out at an audience of respected professionals who now viewed me as a colleague rather than a curiosity, I realized that being betrayed and humiliated had ultimately led me to a level of success and recognition I might never have achieved otherwise. The truth had indeed set everyone free, but perhaps no one more than myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.